is a
Well,
great.
it's awesome to meet you, to see. I mean, honestly, it takes me back. Do you remember playing Finsbury Town Hall with that man who we're not allowed to say his name, Mr. Glitter?
Yes, him. Yes, I do remember. I remember that.
You were sensational. And I don't think he could handle how good you were. And do you remember he always used to pull a bomb scare?
Well, it's interesting because that story is in my book. Isn't it interesting that a bomb scare went off? And interestingly, that building was cleared out of all the people, and then they were all let back in just before Gary's gig.
I was there, and we were blown away by your performance. We loved it because I don't know if you probably don't remember my band, but we were called Ritz back in the day.
Ritz.
The Music Machine and all the. I brought a little picky to show you. That was me back in the day with Ritz.
Oh, that's great, isn't it? That's a great picture.
But we were all from that kind of art school, mad, wonderful, creative. I mean, your performances were off the hook. They were fantastic.
Oh, thank you. Yes, well, we were a lot younger and more energetic then.
We know all about that. We were pretty much the same as well. You know what I mean? You always have to show, you know, put your best energy forward to sort of like shock the crowd so they're going to go, oh, those guys, we got to go and see them again. They're great musicians, but I love the energy.
You know, you did have that, you know, that was that B-52s thing that came up later.
Yeah.
You know, we were all part of that art school thing because the front guy with me in the band was at the Royal College of Art. He was an artist, sculptor. We all had that language of kind of pop, Andy Warhol, magazines. I mean, you were like the Beano come to life, but fantastic with energy and great haircuts. And we were all in that world of playfulness, image, but really going for it and really passionate about our music and our energy of performing and giving the crowd a great time.
Well, absolutely. And I think performing, you know, I personally feel that music is a lot more than just, well, I'm playing an instrument. You know, what I couldn't stand is these ghastly guitar bands that you'd have in the 90s where they'd just play and look at the floor and they'd be wearing clothes that they look like they'd just been clearing the shed out, you know. And what was great about Imagination was you guys dressed up as well, you know. That was fantastic.
That's what it's all about.
They were amazing, weren't they?
That's what it was all about.
Weren't they? Yeah.
Entertain the audience, and that's what you did as well with your band, and the same with, you know, Ritz. It was about, you left there feeling, wow, I've paid my money, I've been perfect, I've been entertained, and wow, I've seen some glitter, I've seen something really different. Rather than now, everybody's sort of like, it's just so normal. So a guy would come off the stage and you wouldn't, so he's in the band? You just wouldn't know, would you? It would just disappear.
Yeah.
You know,
it's about showbiz. It's really...
It is. It is, you know, and, you know, people often say to us, you know, oh, what drugs do you want to be able to do a show like that? So absolutely no drugs whatsoever. You know, we might have a pint of beer before going on stage generally, but generally you had to maintain all your fitness and your ability to be able to do a show, you know. Afterwards, get as messed up as you like, but you're playing for an audience. And sometimes we'd do big shows, but also do tiny shows, done everything from like 7,000 seaters down to pub gigs. And a lot of them were pub gigs. And even if there is only 50 people in the audience, those people have paid to see you. You give them a performance no matter what, you know.
You're so right. I mean, like you probably...
I love you, man. That's what it's all about.
And it was so... You look back at the stuff now and it's still got that great energy. And I mean, the girls, I love their little beat bop dancing, the two dancers and the front singer. And you were always magic and your kits always look great.
Oh, well, the reason for the mad kit really is simply, one of the mad kits was... well, all of us dressed up because you had Eugene and Faye, the two lead singers. So it was Eugene with the wraparound shades and Faye and all the mini skirts and all the accoutrement. Then you'd have the Revettes that would have two backing singers in micro mini skirts gyrating away on the stage. And then you've got guitar, bass, and drums. So you've got a three-piece band with four singers on the top of it, and they're all going crazy. So the three of us, the guitarist, the bassist, the drummer, we were all thinking, well, how can I make myself more visible here? Because there's this barrage of vision to look at the front, and how can I get at least some girls look at me every now and then? So what I'd do everything I could. I'd wrap sparklers to my drum kit and drumsticks and set fire to them until they started setting fire to my hair and burnt holes in my drum skins. And so then I had to stop doing that. So, but it was anything I could do just to get a bit of attention, you know. So it was about attention seeking. But what happened was you had 7 people in the band, all attention seekers, all doing their best to be seen, and that made for a kind of a visual, you know, and that's important, I think.
And it was so good. I mean, I loved the big spoon, the fork, you know, the eight bottle, you know, all that kind of stuff. And we were into that world. We, you know, we love that.
They weren't big bottles and forks. We were just midget people.
I was going to ask you that. No.
Didn't like to talk about it.
You were always on the cutting edge. Your kits looked great, and your costumes. You entertained to the max, and I loved you.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. So, how did you get to know about Drumathon?
Yeah.
Well, Drumathon, you know what? I didn't get to know about it last year till after the last one, until after the event, and I was so angry with myself, thinking, how come I didn't know about something as major as this? You know, it's a Drumathon. Of course, I should have known about it. And you know, I just didn't know. So afterwards, I was quite annoyed with myself that I hadn't discovered it. So so this year, I was really keen to be involved with it. You know, it's I think. Thing is with Drumathon is it's such a unique, good idea, you know, and I know you always get these stories about, look out, the drum solo is starting, everybody, you know, go to the bar, you know, that kind of thing. But I think it's much more to drumming than that. And I always, when people say that to me, I always say, well, just don't ever let the drum solo end, because that's when the bass solo starts. So for me, the important thing is with Drumathon is that the charity end of it is, you know, so important, because I mean, a member of my family has suffered most of their life from mental illness and difficulties, and that not only affected her, but it also affected the rest of the family quite severely, and it really had an impact on us throughout our lives, and so that's something that you don't realize how insidious it is, and how it can eat into you. And I think I'm so pleased that mental health in the last few years has become, it's been okay to talk about it, and now it's becoming a bit more mainstream. Now people aren't afraid to say it anymore. I sometimes think back to people like Elvis, you know, who obviously wanted to maintain his image, and I know he was eating too many burgers and everything else and taking drugs and that, but I think perhaps and he wanted to keep that persona of himself going, and I think perhaps if he lived now, he'd be quite happily checking the Betty Ford clinic and make a big thing of it. There'd be a big news story on it, and he'd come out cleaned up, come back better than ever, you know. And so I think it's a shame for people that they get sort of encased in this little that ever decreasing circle of mental illness, but that's not just people who have a quite extreme example of that. That also affects us in the lockdown in the last year. I've noticed it so much, including me. I've been climbing the walls at times as well, and many of us have. And we've had these flutters where we get upset. You might have a cry and this, that, and the other, and get really upset about things, or some things just can feel blown out of proportion, but they're that size in your head. And I think that it's time that more was done for mental illness. And I'm glad to hear that. I think there's going to be some more funding from the government as well, I think, in the Queen's speech tomorrow. So you know, that's
brilliant, isn't it? It is brilliant. And I mean, you touched on something that I'm really connected to too, because you know, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, mental illness, you know, I had my mum was suffering deeply with schizophrenia, and it went through all our lives. So I understand, and it impacts the whole family. But then it was like, I mean, we loved her so much. She was beautiful and all that stuff, but the illness was tough and nobody would understand it. You couldn't talk about it. It was like a prison sentence. You didn't, you know, and people say, you know, the mum's a bit, you know,
that's how they reference to it. But I think what's happening here, the conversation that we're having, and Drumathon is all about that. It's sort of like opening that box so people can be exactly what we're saying here. Instead of putting in the box, we're opening the box to make the conversation about mental health. We're opening up so people can actually be acceptable for,
and
you know, and
support
it, and do something about it, because it's been in the box for too long.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And, you know, together, that's the message that Drumathon is sending. We're opening the box, making more awareness, and getting all the powers to be to do something about it. I mean, one of the interesting things is we're supporting 5 charities, right? And then the biggest charities are in the UK. that's that
yeah,
that's
I mean,
important.
you know, the Anna Freud Centre, the guy Peter Fonagy, Professor Peter Fonagy, who came on board, he's a great guy. You know, he's behind all these. I mean, he's someone who's changed many people's lives because of the way he thinks about things. You know, he talks about this thing, mentalism, you know, and it's the way you think things through and create a new way of being so that you see things differently. And you know, he went through so much, so it's this lovely, it's like a baton that's being passed on, isn't it, that we're all getting a little bit more confident and saying it's okay to wobble, it's all right, you know. Most of us do now and again, and life is tricky, and it throws things up, and every now and again some people wobble a little bit more and some people a little bit less, but if we can be there for each other.
And my wife often helps me out of that as well. She, you know, she says, you know, start, and it's really basic stuff like start thinking that glass is half full, not half empty. Just those really simple things like that. Those simple messages are still important to get across to people. So I know, and it's just slightly reframing how you think about things, and not just, it's just somehow pulling yourself out of that quagmire of feeling down. If you just turn that around, you know, and just slightly pull yourself up, and then you kind of, you know, you put that strength, the invisible strength, at the top of your head and pull yourself up a bit and say, I'm going to walk tall, I'm going to walk proud, you know, all those kind of things. Just those little things make a difference. And so for me, I always wanted to be, I wanted to break away from the compressed society norms of the 60s. I mean, I'm a child of the 50s, and so I grew up in the 60s. So for me, seeing all the change that happened through the world was a fantastic time to live through. And I think that people of a certain age have lived through sort of rock and roll of the 50s. You've got beat groups of the 60s. You've got girl groups of the 60s, and then you've got the flower power. You've got the whole Carnaby Street thing. You've got progressive rock. Then you're going into the 70s with all the T-Rex and glitter. Then all the soul music. Disco stuff, then into punk, and then, you know, and it's just, gosh, what a time to live through.
Oh,
you know?
We lived through the best years.
I mean, I really totally agree with it. But it's also really interesting something you just said, like when you get into that depression thing and out of mental health, and you as a drummer, right? Do you find sometimes when I get into that position, you know, when I'm feeling a little bit, I pick up my sticks and I start doing paradiddles, and all of a sudden, it takes me to a different place. Do you find that happens to you? Because, you know,
totally. The number of times I've been on the edge, and I've got a pair of drumsticks, and I've just, sometimes not even a drum, sometimes just a pillow, and I'll sit there and I'll work it out. And the number of times when I was younger and I was like a teenager, I really had this kind of anger and aggression in me. But my mates who I'd be with, they'd go and maybe have a drink and smash up a phone box at the end of the evening. I'd go and play the drums, you know, and I would just play like a demon. But mum and dad got fed up with me playing in the house. So one day I took the drums outside into the back garden, and I was playing the drums away like this, making a heck of a row. And suddenly this elderly lady came up to me and she said, excuse me. I thought, oh no, here we go. She says, do you know any Gene Krupa?
Oh, what a brilliant line. Oh,
I love it.
Oh, wow.
But it's so good for the brain and the emotions, isn't it? Because I think with drumming, people don't realize how complex it is, because using your left arm, your right arm, your left foot, your right foot,
splitting the brain.
It's split in the middle.
Splitting the brain, yeah.
Split the brain.
You know, and that from a neuroscience point of view is like massive, because it's clicking all those things open and really gives you the positive. I always think you're like the surfers of the sea, you know, the surfboarders. You know, you've got this calm because you're beating the out of things, you know, and then
I always think
wonderful.
You look at drummers, and what I love about you, there's a nice calm that comes from, because you're a drummer without a doubt. Because you look at drummers, they're always really calm. Because remember what you've just said. You go in, you bash out, you're like full of phone box. You go and smash the drums up, and then you have that calm. And you look at all the drummers. There's a nice drumming community, and it's like a really nice family, because everybody's really calm. And it's true to what you say. The real drummers, we just go on the kit and smash it out. Yeah. What interests me as well, I love your kit, and I love the creation of your kit. And that kit that you've got, that's got all the neon, it's got the, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a work of art. You know,
brilliant. Tell us about your cocktail kit as well, because I love the pin-ups on there. How did that?
Well, that's what it is that cocktail kit. It was only like a couple of £100. You can buy those really cheap. But a cocktail kit for the uninitiated is when the you'll probably know this, Errol, but when the big bands started to get smaller in the 50s, and they went from the dance halls to the much smaller venues, they would play smaller clubs until they were playing virtually cocktail lounges, and they became what was a big band down to like a 3 or 4 musicians cramped together up a corner. You know the feeling of being cramped together up a corner at a gig. And so the drummers started turning their bass drum upright. They cut with an upright drum like this, and then with a little cymbal on the top. It looked a bit like a cocktail drink, with a little umbrella in it. The cymbal is the umbrella. So it'd be called not only a cocktail bar, but a cocktail kit, because it looked like one. I thought, what can I do with this to make it look kind of vintage? And I always liked it. I don't know if you remember, you've seen that the nose art from World War II on the front of bombers, and there'd always be there'd be a kind of pin-up girl on there. She'd be leaning back on something, on a bomb or something, and there'd be all those kind of army colors, the kind of cream, the brown, the green kind of colors, and then there'd be some kind of wording on it as well, and with some sort of lovely looking lass on there.
Yeah,
you are amazing.
Stop, right?
You're amazing. You're an inspiration. You really are. It comes out in every area of your life, and that's what's so exciting. And you've got such compassion, and we just are really grateful for what you're doing, coming on board with the Drumathon.